You're listening to Gamesforum's Mobilize and Monetize podcast. Dive into the world of mobile gaming with us as we explore the latest trends and discuss best practices.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mobilize and Monetize. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by none other than Nina Mackie, who is co-founder at WeGame2. Nina, so happy to have you on today. Thank you so much for taking the time to, come and talk to me.
No, it's a pleasure. Always. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to have a bit of a chat with you about what's new and tell you a bit more about WeGame2.
So we have a lot of exciting sort of topics to talk about today. Some really important things as well. So I want to kick off our discussion straight away. Nina, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey through the gaming space, and even, a bit of a 3-in-1 question here, and even a little bit about WeGame2 for those who don't know.
Yeah, sure. Love to. So I'm in my 40s, so I've been in advertising for quite a long time, over 20 plus years. Started out, way back when it was like newspaper ads. You had a deadline every Friday and you had to frantically call to sell like a quarter page and stuff. Terrible job. I would not recommend it. And then sort of, moved through advertising, obviously internet, web-based advertising became really popular. And then I transitioned into mobile advertising. And I think my sort of move into gaming, which was about 6 years ago, was very deliberate. I've been a gamer my entire life. I had an Atari, I had an Amstrad, a Spectrum, a Commodore, Amiga, and then the earliest consoles as well. And I currently have a PS5 there, which I'm sad get to play very much because I'm so busy. So yeah, it kind of made, I think, the kind of innovation that was starting to happen within not just mobile gaming, but gaming in general for advertisers. I was really interested in that. So made a decision 6 years ago to kind of at first move into more of the sort of mobile advertising space within gaming. So yeah, I've been doing that for a little while now. And then last year was the year that I co-founded WeGame2. And WeGame2 is essentially like a gaming consultancy. So we help companies right across the gaming ecosystem. So we work with everyone from studios who want to develop new ad products and make sure that they are, that the regulatories are suitable for advertisers and brands. And then we also work with the brands themselves and their media buying agencies to help them build out gaming strategies that are inclusive and diverse and, really consider like a gaming environment instead of what they might be traditionally used to spending on. So that's kind of that in a nutshell.
So you mentioned 2 words there, and it kind of gives me a nice leeway into my next question. You mentioned inclusive and diverse. Now, in founding WeGame2, for my little bit of research that I did on you guys' company before we jumped on this podcast, I want to give you the opportunity to sort of talk on this, but what sort of gap did you see in the gaming ecosystem that you felt that your company could address?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's something I thought very long and hard about because starting a business on your own is actually really quite challenging. And you have to know that there's a demand for it and that you're essentially solving a problem, right? One thing that I was becoming increasingly frustrated with when I was dealing with advertising within gaming or marketing was that there was a real barrier from one side to the other. So the studios and developers had one objective and priority, and then obviously the brands and the advertisers had another, and they were communicating with each other. And so what happens is the player is the one that suffers. Yeah. So you either have, advertising and marketing strategies that don't talk to you, or they don't represent your communities or your diverse groups. Or you have really badly formatted advertising campaigns or badly positioned. I kind of wanted to address the fact that I couldn't really see any female-founded businesses in this space, certainly not any female minority-founded businesses. And that's a real shame because, we're gamers too, and, we definitely have an opinion when it comes to advertising and, how we're served ads. There's a real gap in the market there. I think, I do have a very personal motivation for setting up the company. I want to see things improve, and I want to see brands and studios build better products and do better campaigns. And my co-founders who I reached out to, they're both very heavy media agency background. absolute legends in the industry. And of course, they're both female. It's female founded. They have their own company as well. They help businesses launch in market into new markets, and they're both mothers. They've got families. So I think we're, collectively, the three of us are actually quite a unique group, and represent a lot of those sort of groups and communities that don't really have a voice in the industry right now.
Right, I love to see it. So in terms of, how does WeGame2's approach to sort of impartial assessment and inclusive campaign creation differentiate you from other companies in the ad tech space? I mean, you sort of touched on this a little bit before, that you found that there was something missing and you wanted to fill in that gap. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, again, this company was created because there really are not many, certainly not any in the UK, companies that represent that diverse community of players. Giving advice or consulting to brand marketers, right, in that space. And that's really, I think, where the gap is. For us, it's really important to be agnostic and to work right across the industry. But, ultimately, I want to see improvements both at the game development level, right through to actually those marketing campaigns and how they're executed. So I think for us, what we offer is number one, a very sort of ground level perspective of that experience for the player, and number two, a really deep understanding of both game development and the advertising industry as a whole. So what should you be doing? What could you be doing to do the better? And then obviously from a personal standpoint, what would I like to see and how would I like to be targeted? And to my knowledge, I don't really know of any companies that exist that have that kind of broad perspective, if you like, across all aspects of the industry.
You sort of touched on something that was really interesting, and that was like, sort of full funnel experience from the players all the way to like the ad experience and everything in between. So you guys sort of focus on creating ad experiences that add value to players. Can you give an example of how you sort of achieve this balance between advertising and user experience? Maybe perhaps, pulling some experience that you've had personally.
Yeah, so I mean, also just to clarify, that's not all we do, but yeah, when we're working on the advertiser brand side or the agency side, then yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to look at what could be done better, and a lot of the consulting and advising that we offer is very much about that creative brand ad experience, right? So how do you, and as well as I do, it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
You want to offer some value to the players, but you also don't want to disrupt the user experience too much. You want to keep your audience engaged and receptive. So there's a few ways of doing this, and there's a few companies I think that do this really well. Seamless sort of integration is something that we're all aware of. So, sort of integrated ads that form part of the game environment. So these are readily available across lots of publishers at the moment, and they can be bought programmatically. They're native to the environment, so they're very upper funnel. They don't actually involve much engagement from the actual player. Mm-hmm. So on the one side, the drawback is there's little to no engagement, but the plus side is it doesn't disrupt the user experience. So the majority of game publishers out there are quite happy to adopt that type of ad format. Yeah. The second one, which I think is a bit more interesting, and I would say probably adds more value to both the player and the brand, is like reward-based advertising. Most big publishers are no stranger to this. I think reward-based ads that offer things like in-game currency or items, or it could be additional play time, in exchange for watching an ad, or it just means that the ad experience tends to be voluntary, as long as it's not forced. Then I think it gives the player a sense of control, and it does make them more likely to engage with content. And I think to that point, to extend on that a little bit further, if you think about user choice and control, that's really important in an ad experience. So give players the opportunity to watch them at moments that are the least disruptive, right? So for example, like between levels or during a natural pause in the gameplay. So just providing options for when they can actually engage with the ads and it's respecting their experience and not being too disruptive. And then another couple of things would be like just making sure that the ads are actually relevant and they're targeted. So obviously if the player's given consent to be advertised to, you want to make sure that you are leveraging any data that you have about the player's interests, just so that they're more likely to be perceived as valuable rather than just like, rubbish ads that are being disruptive. And then just little things, I would say, common mistakes that I do see both from the publishers and from the brands. Frequency. It's such a bugbearer for me, and I'll tell you why, actually, because when you're navigating with brands who haven't really spent on gaming before, they're so used to when they run display ads across web, internet, display, that they have these really high frequency caps. You really don't want to be serving like 80 ads per player session in a game,
please.
I believe people do. We see this all the time.
Yeah.
Ads or long unskippable ads. They're just a massive bugbearer. They're actually not good for player retention, and they're not good for the brands either, because they start to be associated with annoyance. It's a negative experience. So just kind of, again, educating the brands on how to create a good, valuable ad experience. And then things like transparency and privacy. So just being really clear on what the ad is and what it offers. Things like that, I think, are really useful.
Some really, really good tips there, Nina. So for those who don't know as well, Nina's also CRO as well as co-founder. So there's so much talk about monetization and, ROAS and key revenue growth strategies. So as CRO, what are some sort of key revenue growth strategies that you've implemented at WeGame2, in the last perhaps 9 months, and you can share? Can you share that? I mean, the people want to know.
I think for us, we're quite a unique business, right? Because we work right across the ecosystem. We're not just on the developer side, and we're not just on the advertiser side. We also work with ad tech companies in the middle. Yeah. And I think that diversification of who we can work with is actually already a revenue builder for us. Right. So, we don't just work with the brands, but if we can work with a studio as well. The other thing I looked really closely at last year and in the turn of this year was the models, the commercial models. So whereas a lot of our clients, in fact, all of our clients pay us a retainer, how that's structured might differ from one company to another. So with some, we might have a lower retainer, but we actually get a commission on everything that we help, whether we bring on new publishers or new games, or whether we bring on new ads. Or we might have a project. So they might just want us to work on a one-off project. We don't need to be in a long contract with somebody, but we might be, let's just say it's Pernod Ricard, and they want us to consult on a particular campaign that's coming up. That's just a fee, right, for our project, and we would bill them. So I think that's probably two of the main ones. And the other ones, just markets. So again, the wonderful world of remote working, right? I think we've all got COVID to thank for that. But again, it just means that, as long as the times ones aren't ridiculous, like I can literally pitch a new business in any market that I want, really. And subsequently I'll have clients in the US, in Sweden, in Singapore, in Sydney. Nice. So, they're literally all over, and with some in the UK. So I think that's, for me, it's about being flexible and being able to also negotiate on terms and things like that. So that's the best advice I can give.
I was going to say, it seems like flexibility is such a key strength of yours, it seems. And it's sort of enabled you, which is awesome. All this sort of key markets that you guys are hitting. So a bit of future gazing here for you, Nina. Looking ahead, what are some of the biggest trends that you kind of see emerging within the gaming ecosystem? And, that being said, how do you feel that WeGame2 will adapt to these changes?
Great question. I love innovation, and I get really excited about future trends. And I think, in the last year and a half, things have just started to really pick up in terms of wow, there's some just incredible stuff happening. Yeah. Personally, I'm most excited about two things. I'll name a few actually that I'm actually actively working on at the moment. Obviously, advancements in virtual reality, augmented reality, or XR, extended reality, as it's referred to in the brand world. Yeah, that's really exciting because I think one of the clients I work with is called Spatial, and they've been around for about 7 years. They were one of the first big companies to build a platform that was VR focused, and probably a little bit ahead of their time, because the problem, of course, was that VR technology, like what was actually being created wasn't great. So, you had this incredible platform that's capable of lots of stuff, but the actual content wasn't fabulous.
Yeah.
I think now, especially with the launch of Apple Vision Pro, things are really heating up. If you haven't seen a demo of it, it's absolutely insane. And I think
so cool. Like it actually just looks, I saw that demo and I was like, I was absolutely blown away.
It's awesome. And I think there's two reasons why. Obviously, for most people, right, that's kind of outside the price bracket. It's $3,000 for a headset. But I think what's important about Apple Vision Pro and why they're launching this $3,000 headset at the time that they are, this is kind of like a beta test, right? They want all the feedback from people in the industry. And not only is it incredible, but it's kind of like exciting to me because I can see this sort of convergence of VR gaming, this interoperability across devices or being able to interact in real time. So, for example, one use case that we're looking at right now is a big sports broadcaster. Now, they want to stream a boxing match, right? But have people who've got a VR headset at home can play with a game that's been integrated into the 3D environment, right? So you can watch the stream, and then whilst there's a pause, you can do a quick quiz or a game, on your headset, which is like, a touch screen, a virtual touch screen. Stuff like that I am just incredibly excited about. So that's probably my first one that you can tell that I'm super excited about. Second one is integration of AI and machine learning. And again, another really cool thing that I'm seeing is like AI sort of generated like NPCs, so non-playable characters, and how these are being used. So if you think about it from like the perspective of like an online multiplayer game online, you've got a chat room, you maybe have a moderator system in there. That's really quite tough when it comes to if you've got multiple hundreds of thousands of people all connecting at once for big tournaments. Things like AI, machine learning can help to moderate that. They can make it a bit more dynamic and responsive and kind of take away some of that heavy lifting from human moderators and so on. So I think that's going to become really interesting as well. And some other top ones, the growth of cloud gaming, I think from an accessibility point of view, web gaming as well. So people who don't have high-end hardware are now able to play like really high-quality, high-fidelity games on cloud gaming. Cross-platform gaming, again, that's definitely becoming more popular. And then obviously from my point of view, there is much more of a focus on diversity and inclusion in gaming. We're starting to see indie developers who are building more inclusive sort of gaming characters and narratives. I mean, I remember not even 3 years ago, you couldn't get like Afro hair for your avatar.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, why not? Like, it's so easy.
Actually, I will say, except on, and this is so funny because they've just relaunched their game, Habbo Hotel Origins, and I noticed because I logged onto it and I was like, they've always had like a character with an afro hair, so they were sort of like ahead of the game, and they were mobile as well. So just thought I'd give them a little bit of a shout out there. Yeah,
well, you should, and I think even like I think the rise in sort of indie developers as well, like being able to accessibility to indie developers, I should say, so being able to build and publish and distribute their own games, I think it's just incredible. So we are starting to see now, support for inclusive game narratives and characters, and I'm massively on board for that. I think that's going to become more of a rather than a trend, but kind of like a mainstay now.
Absolutely.
Sustainability again. So how is game development going to reduce environmental impact? I think that's really important to brands as well, to know that if Spatial, for example, are web-based, and a lot of their use cases are people who are actually doing twin versions of real world spaces, like experiential in real life, and they want to gamify it in a 3D environment. So again, from a sustainability point of view, and reducing environmental impact, it makes perfect sense. So and then probably a bit further forward, but things like haptic devices where like they're stimulated by touch and so on. I think that might follow on with VR. Yeah. But there's tons to get excited about. I'm literally like always keeping up to date on the latest innovations and trends. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And we obviously can't talk about all these trends and opportunities without sort of touching on challenges. So, Nina, I kind of want to ask you, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face, both as CRO and co-founder of a company in this space? And how do you sort of approach overcoming them? What are your sort of tips and tricks around them?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots of challenges. I think the first and foremost, and this is probably one I touched on in your first question, was that at the moment, the studios and the game development side is not connected to the advertiser brand side. Very, very few studios have a direct relationship with brand advertisers. And that causes a huge problem because there's a massive lack of understanding on both sides of what each other is trying to gain from the player. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I have is there's this hesitancy to invest from the brand side.
Yeah.
Because they just don't understand it or they've never done it before. So they don't really have, that use case or confidence to go in there. I think there are lots of really good things happening in this space now. I think on the advertiser side, you have industry bodies like IAB, so Internet Advertising Bureau, have actually very recently, within the last couple of years, have sort of updated their guidelines for best practice for in-game advertising. And I think
I didn't even know that. That's really cool.
So I was part of that original committee back in 2019. And it's kind of like we all know that it's relatively safe, right, to do in-game advertising. But I think the advertising industry was very hesitant because there wasn't this rubber stamp of approval, right? So if you look at other channels like TV or, they're highly regulated, right? So they have the Advertising Standards Authority. I mean, you cannot really do much without, if you do something wrong, you're fined straight away.
Right.
I think that's the gaming advertising is getting to the stage now where the regulators are, you've got other industry bodies who are championing that it is safe. There are partners you can work with to make sure there's no fraud. And so it's getting there. I think we're still probably a few years away from it becoming a completely mainstream advertising channel.
Yeah.
But we are definitely on track. I think there's, just looking at the amount of money that's being spent on innovation, brand integrations and some of the bigger platforms, it's a lot of money. The desire is there for the brands, but I think that hesitation is just really down to wanting to see others do it first. And look, they've got to invest. They have to test and learn. And I think they're reluctant to do that. They're going to fall behind. So that's kind of where I'm. I usually use that narrative when I'm talking to brands. If they haven't spent before, that you have to test and learn. You're competitive in doing it. So, what you're testing and learning now will form your core strategy in between 5 to 10 years. You'll know exactly what you're doing. So
absolutely. Yeah. Really interesting stuff. So, I know that WeGame2 obviously works with a very diverse audience, and this is a bit of a personal one, but I kind of wanted to almost use this as an example that, look, it is being done and it's possible. So how does your sort of company or culture reflect this commitment to inclusivity, diversity, particularly within your teams? How do you sort of, take on what you want to put out there, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's only 3 of us, so for WeGame2. But I think, at the core of what all 3 of us sort of agree on is that we fundamentally believe that the gaming industry needs to improve in terms of diversity and inclusion, both what's being created, the hiring, the infrastructures within those studios, and also in the brand side as well with their messaging and how they actually communicate with players within their own individual communities. Yeah. So obviously we're female founded, different ethnicities, all of us. We've got 2 of the founding members that are, parents, so they have children of their own, their family, they've got, household families. And then we have quite a diverse background in terms of I'm sort of the gamer one, and then they're media agency background. So I think that does resonate in the clients that we work with, how we work with them, how we operate. Culture is super, super important to everything that we do. And I think, you really do have to kind of live what you're telling people. I am a constant champion for supporting diverse groups. I constantly network. I constantly bring people in, who might be graduates, who are looking for internships. I'm always connecting people who I think are fabulous in the industry with others. And I think that's, that they're probably some of the small things I think you can just do daily that do have these kind of small improvements, and over time it can produce really wonderful things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that you said you have to live what you sort of do, and lead with kind of what you embody as a co-founder, as a CRO. So absolutely love that. And last question for you here, and something that I was kind of curious as I was sending you questions for our podcast today, but what keeps you motivated and inspired as you sort of lead WeGame2? What are the things that perhaps get you excited to wake up every day and to approach work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm incredibly, incredibly fortunate that I don't just have WeGame2, I've got 2 companies. I love my job. The reason that I started them was so that I would have autonomy to do things in a way that I think is the right way.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important to me. I, much like everybody else, we all have our internal values, and we sort of conform, right, to other people's standards and values. And I think for me personally, I was kind of getting to the point where I thought I can't keep complaining about like I don't like this, I don't like that. I'm not that type of person. Normally, if I don't like something, I make a change and I do something about it. So I think this was kind of the ultimate, like, okay, I'm actually going to do this and set up my own company, run it the way I see fit, and try and make the changes from internally from here out. So that's definitely what motivates me. I think every new client that we win, every client that's really proud and happy to be working with us, that's the motivation. I think just getting positive feedback from clients, from people in the network, even people who've never really heard of WeGame2, and then we just have a quick intro and they're like, oh my God, I'm really interested in that. How can we be an ambassador? How can we help you?
Yeah.
It kind of just, it's that reassurance that we've got something really cool here. People are passionate about it, and they care. They actually do care. It's not just like the 3 of us. There are actually lots of people out there who want to see the same significant changes that we do. So yeah, it's very motivating. I rarely have a bad day, to be honest.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nina, for your time. It was so inspirational to talk to you, and some really, really good tips that you've actually put out there for everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
And that was it for this week's Mobilize and Monetize podcast. Thank you, everyone. Until next time.